Yes, welcome on into the Auburn Daily Show Friday edition. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, Auburn baseball writer for auburndaily.com, also host of Locked On MLB Prospects. I am joined by the ever wonderful, pleasant Harrison Tarr, chief women's basketball and softball writer for auburndaily.com, as well as host at the College Loop. And Harrison, I know how much you love stats, and so I brought something fun for you to kick off this Friday. So in the last 2 weeks, Auburn has added 1,217 pounds of defensive linemen to this roster. So to kind of recap what it is, Mosiah Nikili-Kite from Maryland, Lawrence Johnson from Purdue, Justin Rogers from Kentucky, and there's one more.
I'm thinking off the top of my head. Let's see. I feel like this.
Quintrell Jamison Travis. There we go. The JUCO lineman.
Right.
So those four guys, 1,217 pounds. Here's my question. Where does everybody play? Ron Roberts runs a 3-down lineman scheme. So where do you put all these guys?
So this is a great question, Lindsay, and I keep asking myself this actually at all phases of the defense, and I know we'll get to that sooner rather than later. But specifically the trenches, there's a lot of guys and not a lot of spots. Which is, if you're an Auburn fan, this is great news because this is something you've not seen since. Let me think. A couple guys named Derek and Marlon played on that defensive line. Not that those names are memorable or anything, but I'll be very curious to see how this all plugs in, specifically at 8A and in spring ball. We'll kind of get a better idea going down the road, but a complete overhaul of the roster to begin with. I mean, shoot, Lindsay, there's 30 plus newcomers to this team. Of 64 scholarship positions, correct?
Yeah,
ridiculous. I'm not entirely sure everybody plays in. I'm very excited to see. I was really waiting on the UK commitment today. We've kind of been talking about Rogers kind of all week about has he actually signed with Auburn yet? Did he sign with Auburn? Is he coming to Auburn? Is Auburn Java, all the whole nine, right? So very very curious to see. I think they're done on the front there. I would if I'm an Auburn fan, I'd probably hope so, because you are running out of space now, and there's I think maybe one more pressing position on the defensive side of the ball. I'm curious your thoughts on Lindsay. How does this all plug in?
So I think the big thing to me is Auburn's going to be able to get back to that thing they used to do before Brian Harsin, where they rotated a little more heavily. It felt like in previous years, and part of it was the time of like once you lost to Derek Brown and the Marlon Davidson, you had to find a way to replace that production. And so Auburn went with more options, give them a little bit more of a chance to take a breather, rotate them a little bit heavier. And it feels like the defensive line went 9 or 10 deep, whereas under Harsin, it went maybe 7 or 8. But Jason Jones, to me, feels like your prototypical big nose tackle. He's 6'6", 328, so he should be your guy. Justin Rogers, 6'3", 330. He's a true nose guard as well. Did that for Kentucky the last couple of years. And so you have a 2 deep right there. And then doing the 3-down lineman set, you typically have like a nose tackle and then more of a traditional defensive tackle on one side and a defensive end on the other. So you can take somebody who's, something like a Marcus Harris, for instance. He's 6'3", 290. He's going to be in your defensive end or defensive tackle role, and then somebody like a Jeffrey Imba, 6'6", 313. Those three guys on the line together. One, you're not going to run against these guys. I mean, that's 900 something pounds.
Nope.
From guard to guard. You've got 900 pounds right there. And then you have a linebacker like an edge and then 2 conventional linebackers. And so Auburn, I think, needs to do some more work at edge. You've got plenty of line options. I could see a 3 deep here for all 3 defensive line positions.
Sure.
Where you feel comfortable with these are 9 or 10 guys that we can revolve through, whether it's, Justin Rogers backing up Jason Jones, Mosiah Nikili-Kite backing up Marcus Harris. You can do something like a Lawrence Johnson backing up Jeffrey Imba. And then you've got the existing guys, your Zykevius Walker, who came back. You've got younger guys like a Tebetchi Okoli, NC Sledge, things like that. Plenty of options. My question is, at edge, who's going to be the guy? You've brought in Elijah McAllister from Vanderbilt as a super senior, and behind him, you've got Dylan Brooks, and I think Brenton Williams as a true freshman, and that's about it. Do you think we're settled at that spot, or do you think we're going to go and get out and get another player or two in the portal?
That's a fantastic question. And every time I try to predict something that Hugh Freeze is about to do, he does the direct opposite. I think McAllister's probably the guy this year, just because of the SEC experience. He's solid coming off the edge. I'm not going to say he's going to be all conference, but he's solid, and he'll take care of business until someone else emerges, if that makes sense. I don't want to say he's useless, because he's not. Definitely a very valuable pickup. Side note, Lindsay, do you ever just think about what if Eku Leota came back one more year? Do you ever think I think about that too much?
That'd be amazing. I mean, it'd be something where you would feel you'd take this room and it would go from a question to an absolute strength, because he looked so much better than we expected last year, bookend with Derek Hall. And if it wasn't for the stupid pectoral injury, we would have gotten to enjoy that dual pass rushing threat for the whole season. I'm
just not entirely sure that Eku Leota's not getting hurt doesn't have you in a bowl game. I kind of ride on that. That's just a side note. But I think that the SEC experience being there is kind of is important, and I think that Freeze is done off the edge. I don't know, because it feels like there's going to be, if there's another one, there's one, maybe two guys left. So I'm not sure if that's the position group you use it in.
A lot of what I've heard kind of says, they're thinking maybe 2 or 3 max. I believe you have until next Wednesday to get a guy at Auburn and registered for classes. So you have a couple days of runway here. But to me, if I'm going to do a guy or 3 guys, I'm going to do edge. I'm probably looking for a quarterback, and we'll get to that in a second. Right. And then I think I'm going with linebacker for my third guy, because you bring in Demario Tolan, a young player from LSU that they were not happy to lose. There's a lot of stuff coming out from whether it was radio hosts, the host of Locked On LSU. Like, they were not thrilled that he entered the portal. They expected him to be there for a while and be a building block. But you've got Demario Tolan, probably going to end up being a starter despite not having a ton of starting experience. You have a talented redshirt freshman in Robert Woodyard. And then you have some returning starters in Cam Riley and Wes Steiner to go along with Eugene Asante, who transferred in from UNC and didn't do a ton. But it feels like this room could use one more super talented, multi-year of eligibility player, right?
That's exactly the group I was actually hinting at a minute ago. I know before we got on the air, we talked about the question mark about DBs, but there are so many DBs on this roster that's just not a problem. I think Auburn's got dogs, absolute dogs in that secondary. I'm a high fan, so I'm very excited about all of this. Demario Tolan, and if you listen to Locked On Auburn with Zach Lockerby earlier today, fantastic episode today. If you want to get fired up about Demario Tolan, great example with the host of Locked On LSU. To your point, I think he's SEC ready, and it just kind of sounds like he just kind of bumped from that LB1 role over in Baton Rouge, and I think he's definitely welcome with open arms to fill that role at Auburn, because. Say what you want about Owen Papo and whether or not he lived up to expectations on the Plains. That's a gaping hole. And you really don't realize, despite what, like I said, people may say about Papo's impact at Auburn, what kind of numbers Owen Papo leaves behind him. And just the sheer volume of somewhere else, these tackles have to be picked up. They got to come from somewhere. So I'm kind of with you. I would expect Auburn to I was surprised when they swung and missed on Ahmad McCullough. But
out of Maryland,
that was a shocker to me. I really thought he was kind of an Auburn lock. But I would be more surprised than not if they did not go after a guy like that.
Well, when you talk about like with Papo leaving for the NFL and what kind of numbers that you have to make up for, so Owen Papo was in the top 11 or so on the PFF grades at, on this defense, 69.6 grade, did some nice work there for us. Cam Riley came in 33rd on defense with a 57.2, and Wes Steiner came in 35th at 56.3. I'm not saying that DeMario Tolan is better than those guys. His score on PFF was also in the 50s, but he was a true freshman in the SEC. So
Right.
he is 3 years younger. He is still getting around the same grade, has had a chance to do the physical development that you would expect from a first-year player in the SEC. And he produced on a outside third party, albeit small sample size, he produced about the same as the guys who have been in the room for multiple years who are now seniors. And so I'm perfectly fine. He's already here. He's on campus. I'm perfectly fine with him winning the job in spring. Even if the first practice of spring, he lines up on the second team, I'm sure we'll know eventually that he is starting. The other position battle, real quick, before we go to break, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts for running back. Auburn brought in USF's Brian Battie, senior, undersized player, 5'8", 165, but put up a ton of yards last year at USF on a pretty bad team. And he joins a room with Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston, and with a commitment from Jeremiah Cobb. How do you find opportunities for Brian Battie to carry the ball?
So to your point, first off, Brian Battie was a standout player on a horrifically bad USF team. You were very generous at pretty bad. That was one of the. I mean, USF's not been great as of recent. That was really Charlie Strong.
Won like one game, right? Like they won a single one game, and it was an FCS game, I think.
Yes, it was hard to watch. But you plug him into this running back room, and we were talking about you're banking on Elijah Cobb and his. Jeremiah Cobb, excuse me. I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm just on one this evening. Jeremiah Cobb's supposed commitment to Auburn right now, which we're definitely banking on. Damari Alston, and I think that there's not a single soul, at least in the Auburn fan base, in Auburn lore, that doesn't believe that Jarquez Hunter is built for this moment. I think that he's very much next up. I don't think many people dispute me there. But I think Brian Battie fits in, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it was Blackerby that was mentioning this earlier in the week. I think there's little situations where you can plug him in, and not to mention he's kick returner.
Mm-hmm. He was an All-American as a kick returner.
Correct. Which that automatically, in my opinion, is a monster addition for Auburn in the first place, because I'm not entirely familiar with this game. I know he didn't return punts. You'd like to get him to try, because fielding punts was an area of weakness for Auburn last year, and you kind of held your breath every time punt went in the air.
Yep.
I think a Sean Shivers, I hate that comp. I really, because Worm did so much good stuff at Auburn. He really did. He did a ton of very valuable things for the Auburn football program, but he wasn't like a
size-wise, they're in a similar position, right? Being shorter players, and Shivers had a little more of a physical element to his game, while Battie has a little bit more of a elusiveness element to this game. But both of them make it happen from an undersized package. And I think about how Gus Malzahn, not to give Auburn fans PTSD, but how Gus Malzahn would line a backup out wide and bring him across the formation pretty quickly, and they'd fake it 7 or 8 times, and all of a sudden he gets it and he pops and he goes around the corner and takes off for 30 yards. And something like that, a chance to have a bigger role in the passing game, some pass blocking. Pass blocking is not really something that I feel like is taught very well. It's more of a mindset. Right. And from what I understand, talking to USF folks, Brian Battie is a willing and eager pass blocker. And so, obviously there's only so much you can do with size, but he would be better than anybody we have on the roster right now. And I'd like to think that you now have this room pretty much set, and you're looking at edge, linebacker, and maybe a quarterback as we head into classes starting next week.
I think you're absolutely correct. Adding another running back would be bizarre. I mean, and Freeze, we trust, has kind of been the mentality of everyone this offseason, which he's all he's done since he's been here is earn the at least on-field respect of Auburn fans, because he's gotten to work. But I would be floored if another running back surfaced in any capacity that's not a walk or a PWO.
Yeah. And talking about getting the work in, Auburn's got a couple different sporting events over the weekend. I want to get to those in just a second. But first, this season, Auburn Daily has partnered with Prize Picks to bring some fun and variety to the picks for 2023. So if you're not aware, Prize Picks is a free app that lets you choose 2 3, 4, 5, or 6 players from any sport in your wagers. You predict the over or under for the next game, and then you win prizes if they do well. They have flex options, so you don't have to hit every single one. You can get paid with 3 of 5 or 2 of 3. You can have multiple sports in the same parlay. Some of my favorite weekends in the fall was I would write Lindsay's locks, and it was using Prize Picks to cover Saturday's football games. And I would take the props I liked the most out of there with the NFL props I liked the most on Sunday and combine those into a multi-sport parlay. So if you use promo code Auburn, you get double on your first deposit up to $100. It's promo code Auburn for double your first deposit. This college basketball season, win some money with Prize Picks and Auburn Daily. Use promo code Auburn. And talking about basketball or just Auburn sports in general, there's a couple different sporting events this weekend, but I think probably the highlight, the one that has the most star power and rankings and things behind it, is Auburn at Florida for gymnastics on Friday night.
Gymnastics school, for sure.
Everything school.
I've heard Bruce say it a couple times. No, you're absolutely correct. Huge, and if I'm cutting you off, I apologize, Lindsay. I'm very excited about gymnastics. My girlfriend never went to basketball with me. She went a handful of times when we were in school, but she drugged me to she didn't have to drag me, but she was there in line for every Friday night Heights. We were huge gymnastics people. It's mesmerizing. And Auburn's very good. Auburn's somehow better this year than they were last year. Actually, that's not surprising considering the recruiting class was humbuckers. You think what Freeze is doing is cool in football, go check out what Jeff Graba is doing over in gymnastics. Sunisha Lee, number one all around in the NCAA right now. I mean, she's playing on rookie mode, dude. Like, she's done all that she can do at the collegiate level. You would think the only reason she comes back is she thinks Auburn stands a chance at a team national title.
Yeah.
Number one on vault. On beams, because obviously that is her strong suit. And number one in the country on beam. Number 6 on vault. And Auburn's ranked number 5 in the country. So their reward for competing so well against the likes of UCLA, reigning national champions, on Friday of last week is they get to go to Gainesville and go head to head with number 2 Florida in the Swamp. Because it just means more, I guess, Lindsay.
There's something about the SEC, man. Like, every team is good at everything, and it's so hard to, you don't get an easy schedule in any sport when you're in the SEC. Maybe ice hockey.
If there's such a monster, right? I'm sure our club ice hockey team. Actually, I think Georgia's good at that too. So
Georgia's the Ice Dogs are pretty good, actually. Yeah,
that's all I've ever heard. But it's truly remarkable. If you look around the SEC, you have a ton of talent. I mean, Florida and LSU and Auburn are the premier names, and probably Auburn above LSU this year. And then everything else is kind of as you work outward. Big 12 kind of loaded. The Big 10 has a handful. They're super top heavy, and then the Pac-12 feels like whenever there's something random that a sneaky random Pac-12 school can sneak in and be good at outside of UCLA, that's what they're going to do.
Stanford, it's like gymnastics and rowing, or something like that. Stanford
Olympic sports, you can't touch them.
Yeah, they've absolutely got it. Talking about can't touch them and you maybe can't keep up with them. Women's basketball has a challenge on Sunday with LSU.
Right. They have a challenge on Sunday in Baton Rouge against number 5 LSU, who's 16-0 and has blown everybody out to this point. So
again, it just means more.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look around and you're in a rebuild in the SEC and women's hoops, that's just too bad because that's the SEC's, I would say, top heavy, but it's just competitive. I mean, if you take this Auburn team right now out of the SEC and put them pretty much anywhere else, they're probably a 500 in conference team. Mm-hmm. They're still battling back Aisha Coulibaly. I've been calling her a forward all year, and apparently she's listed as a guard, which in my opinion is objectively incorrect. But is out right now indefinitely with a concussion. And this is coming on the heels of, honestly, Scott Grayson, your best guard by far, your redshirt senior that's putting up all these points, finally being able to get back on the floor. So Honesty comes back and plays 17 minutes in a beatdown against Alabama. She only puts up 6 points. Aisha Coulibaly's missing. And Lindsay, the last time that this team all played together was in November against Indiana.
I think they won that game.
They did not.
Oh, okay.
They won the next game against Colorado when
That's what it
Crosby
was. They won before and after that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
This was
Right.
Las Vegas, the tournament in Las Vegas that was in the ballroom that did not have proper medical personnel. I remember all this now.
If you'd like to read a good rant about it, there's a Tarr's take floating out there in the abyss somewhere on the Auburn Daily. But this team cannot get together and be healthy at the same time. And I just at some point, if I'm Coach Jay, I'm banging my head into a wall. The defensive commitments kind of slid away, and you start to wonder. I mean, if you're wondering why they got beat down by Alabama last week, Alabama shot 59% from the field and 50% from three, and that they shot 16 times from three. You're never going to beat a team like that.
No, that's not a very good combination for success there.
No, never. I mean, and Auburn didn't even shoot all that bad. I think they shot somewhere in the ballpark of 42% from the field and like 31% from three, so like average numbers. But you're never going to compete with a team that's just shooting the lights out. The biggest thing that you can do on Sunday against LSU, Lindsay, I'm going to be honest, get out of there healthy and just get better than you were beforehand. I never chalk up an L before the game happens.
Right.
But
shorthanded against a team that's a juggernaut like that, that's one of those where the goal is to don't lose anybody else to injury and work on the things you need to work on.
I'll leave it at this. I think LSU, South Carolina is going to be a very close game this year. So do with that information as you want.
There you go. But a game that we're expecting Auburn to perform well because they're in the friendly confines is men's basketball on Saturday at home versus Mississippi State. There's something about this Auburn team in this arena where I'm not going to say Auburn is unbeatable at home. I mean, they are 9-0 at home. I don't think they've had a ton of close calls at home. I mean, I want to say St. Louis was a 5-point win, which obviously is a little closer than you'd love. Florida was 3 points, something like that. But for the most part, this team is a different animal at home. And so it's your throwback game. You get to welcome in the Bulldogs from Mississippi State on Saturday. You got to feel good about Auburn's chances in this situation against this opponent.
Well, Mississippi State also just became a must-win when they lost to Georgia. It was a must-win regardless, but now you've got to beat Mississippi State, otherwise it looks horrid in the circle of life in the SEC. Which, once again, we're talking about the depth of competition. I'm starting to think maybe Georgia's not that bad, which is crazy for me to be talking about basketball. When you come into the jungle, you're playing two opponents. It's that simple. You're playing Bruce Pearl's squad, and then you're playing the most obnoxiously loud student section I have experienced in college basketball. And I have a pretty large sample size, so I feel qualified in saying that. They're a different monster, and the guys just feed off that. If Alan Flanagan feeds off that and has another big game, by the way, I think I'm ready to say he's back. Yeah,
it would be nice to have pre-injury Alan Flanagan back. On the note of Auburn doing well at home, in the last 13 years, which encompasses some pretty bad Auburn teams, at home, Auburn has lost to Mississippi State one time, and that was 2014.
I'm sure that this is going to that'll age wonderfully, Lindsay, and you saying that out loud has nothing to do with the outcome tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely not how that works. If something happens, send your complaints to @ZachBlackerby on Twitter.
That's right.
Let him know how you feel. But all in all, great weekend. If you're in town, if you're available, go to the basketball game on Saturday. If there's tickets available, obviously support this team. You'll get gymnastics that should be on the SEC Network. You'll get women's basketball. I believe that's also going to be on SEC Network. Harrison, where can people go to find out more about you and everything you have going on?
Well, first off, if you're at the men's basketball game, say hi. Don't be a stranger. I will be around. So I'm actually going to be on the planes this weekend. Say hello. But you can find me at Twitter @ByHarrisonTarr. You can find my written work on theauburndaily.com, a lovely little website I think you might be familiar with, Lindsay. You can also find my other podcasting work if you are not annoyed by my voice in this 30 minutes. You can go listen to The College Loop. That's The College Loop. And yes, it is named after a bus route for the Tiger Transit. So, Lindsay, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I am on Twitter @Crosby Baseball. All of my writing, Auburn Baseball and otherwise, auburndaily.com. And then, just like you, my other podcast, Locked On MLB Prospects, is available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And you can find the merch at aushirts.com. Stay safe this weekend. Until Monday, this has been the Auburn Daily Show.